meets all of the famous people who come to our community, and he recently shook our dear George Bush's hand, and he was thrilled by that. And Joel is a great person to know because he's traveled to communist countries and he's lived in South Africa. And he's been anxious to tell you about his experience with Mandela because he lived there in 1988. So, is that right?
I went there for 3 weeks, fact-finding trip.
Okay, so Joel is going to tell you whether Nelson Mandela is a maniac or a saint. He's either a saint or he's a sinner. And I think Joel is ready to tell you his opinion about Nelson Mandela. So it's all yours, Joel.
All right. Folks, I came here to expose Mandela, not to praise him. I had the fortune myself of taking a 19-day fact-finding trip to South Africa in March of 1988. I had been a member of the Council of Conservative Citizens and the Manatee Citizens Council here at that time, and Colonel Bob Slimp put this trip together. He put 6 of them together, and I decided I'm going to go on this one. I don't want to miss it. In talking about Nelson Mandela, let me just go briefly at his beginning, and I want to discuss the ANC, because we had military briefings, police briefings, and we had a defector from the ANC talk to us. Nelson Mandela, as you know, was born 95 years ago. He got involved, he was not a poor, underprivileged black man. He came from a royal family, Xhosa family. The Xhosas are the second largest tribe in South Africa. Xhosa, Xhosas. They are the second largest tribe in South Africa. He was well educated. He had privilege. But for some reason, he hated the white man in South Africa. He thought he was jealous of him. And he drifted towards the left, became a communist, formed the ANC. They were planning the violent overthrow of the South African government, starting by killing black policemen. Any black man who cooperated with the government was worse off than a white man. They wanted to kill him. Well, they stopped him in 1962. He was arrested, tried for treason in Rivonia, sentenced to life in prison. Okay? But that didn't end it. The ANC continued. But they were no threat. They were a pinprick until 1974. What happened in 1974, Angola collapsed. The Portuguese pulled out. The communists, there was a civil war between anti-communists and communists. The Cubans sent in 40,000 troops and took over. Okay, when they took over, the ANC training bases were started there with Soviet aid. Soviet aid came in, and they would go back into South Africa and kill people, plant bombs, et cetera, et cetera. All right, 1983. I'm jumping to 1983 because that was an important year. They had a riot, and they took over Soweto, which is part of Johannesburg. It's Southwest Township. In taking over Soweto, they started a reign of terror. South Africa finally cracked down, crushed it, and our liberal congressman, our liberal senator said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't kill communists. You're a racist government. We're going to put sanctions on you." Okay, they passed sanctions against South Africa. Reagan vetoed it, and with the help of Newt Gingrich and Connie Mack, they overrid Reagan's veto. But at the same year, there was testimony before the Denton Committee. I don't know how many of you heard of Senator Jeremiah Denton of Alabama, who was a prisoner of the North Koreans. He wrote When Hell Was in Session. Well, anyhow, he did an investigation of the ANC. And this man, who I met his daughter while I was over there. We'll get to that in a second. But this man was he was a high-ranking official of the ANC. His name was H.L. Schlafani. He testified before the Denton Committee in the U.S. Senate and said they are a terrorist organization. Okay? He went back to Soweto. The ANC broke into his house, killed him, and wounded his daughter, who we met, who was in a wheelchair. This is what happened. Now, how many of you are familiar with the term necklacing? That's a specialty of the ANC. And when we were in South Africa, the second day we were in Pretoria, we had a police briefing. And during that police briefing, we had a defector from the ANC, a black man, who was in one of their terrorist training camps in Angola, but he was sent into the Soviet bloc for further indoctrination. Well, he didn't like it, and on his way back, they passed through France, and he went to the South African embassy and said, I want to defect. He spoke to us about what goes on in a terrorist training camp in Angola. Let's say you wake up one morning and say, you know, I disagree with you. I don't like what you said. Bang, you're dead. Or you say, hey, you argue with someone. I want to get out. I want to go home. I'm sick of this. Bang, you're dead. You don't disagree. So these people are sent back into South Africa. And what we learned while we were over there was the planting of limpet mines, Soviet-made. I've got pictures of them here in my picture book. I took 260 pictures, Kruger Park. Whoops. And I got pictures of Soviet-made weapons that they had captured that were at that police station. What a limpet mine is they put it, a mine, let's say you're waiting for a bus, they put it in the ground next to the bus, where the bus stops, boom! 13, 12, 15 people are killed. They did that all over South Africa, killing civilians, deliberately targeting civilians. The man who was responsible for that was named Chris Hani. He was designated as Mandela's successor. We went to the border with Mozambique, where the terrorists come in from Mozambique, they come in from Angola. They had razor wire up there to keep them out. One of our guys in our group was funny and said, well, what if they pole vault across the razor wire? And he says, yeah, we had a guy who did that. But you see these stones, these sharp edges we put in the ground? When he pole vaulted, he cut himself, and we followed the trail of blood and caught him. Now, while we were there, we went into Soweto. Now, Soweto is an interesting place. You have prefabricated homes and you have modern constructed apartments. A lot of Soweto looks like Oniko, okay? We drove by Winnie Mandela's house, mansion, I should say. And I got a picture of it right here, 3-story mansion. A poor, oppressed black woman. She murdered a 14-year-old boy a couple of years later. So murder number 1 for her. While we were there, a year earlier, Freedom House did a report on freedom in Africa. Human rights, freedom. They found that of the 42 nations in Africa, outside of South Africa, 35 had less freedom than under apartheid rule South Africa. So why were those 35 nations also sanctioned by the UN? And what is the meaning of apartheid anyhow? Apartheid meant separate development. The ultimate goal of the South African government was there's 17 tribes in South Africa. Some of them hate each other's guts. When you say black majority, which black majority? The Zulu, the Xhosa, the Shangaan, the Sutus. They already at that time set up 4 separate homelands. I went to one of them. It's called Venda. We went to the capital city. They have a lot of slot machines. They had a president who said, I'm president for life, but when he dies, every 4 years they have an election. But they had Ciskei, Transkei, and Bophuthatswana, Sun City. How many of you heard of Sun City? That's where the gambling was, Bophuthatswana. Mandela did away with that when he took power. This is the ANC. This is what Mandela does, is terrorism, killing terrorists. They don't care. While we were there in that police station, we had a video of the riots in Soweto where we saw an actual necklacing. They took a policeman, tied him up, put a tire filled with gasoline and set him on fire. We saw that, and his wife was screaming, crying. This is the ANC. This is what kind of terrorism they did. Now, the government, I never expected the government of South Africa to surrender, but they did, under pressure, and Mandela came to power. Now, in 1993, just before he came to power, Chris Hani, as I mentioned before, was his successor. He was out taking a jog, and this fella assassinated him, shot him, but the guy was a fool. He come back to make sure he killed him, and he got nailed. And his being nailed led to a good friend of ours who was a member of the Conservative Party in South Africa, the only English-speaking member of the Conservative Party, named Clive Darby Lewis. And because they said he gave him the gun, they sentenced him to death. Mandela, of course, abolished the death penalty. Boom, but they gave him life in prison. Now, let's go from that. Mandela becomes president of South Africa. What is the first thing he does? Pardons all the criminals, all the murderers. They turned loose. The murder rate jumps to 50,000 a year. And including was that Amy Beale. I don't know if you all heard of Amy Beale, that naive young American woman who said, I'm going to go there to fight apartheid. How terrible it is. Well, she went there, and the people who killed her were members of the ANC. And the stupidity of that was her parents come there afterwards and cried with them, the murderers of her daughters, if they really cared that they killed their daughter. That's how naive, stupid some liberals are. But nonetheless, Nelson Mandela starts the decline of South Africa. A year later, I think it was 95, the Zulus, the Inkatha Freedom Party, which is the only black opposition to the ANC, marched in protest down to downtown Johannesburg, demanding more freedom from the ANC. Shots rang out. 27 Zulus were shot dead. From ANC headquarters, Mandela squashed any investigation. So Mandela and his associate Joe Slavo is the white guy you see with the clenched fist standing next to Mandela. Joe Slavo was a communist from Lithuania. They run him out of Lithuania. And South Africa was dumb enough to bring him in, and he commanded the militant wing, sending these terrorists in to blow up and kill people. 90% of the people who were killed were non-whites. They were either black, colored, in Hottentot tutus, or Indians. Now let's go a step further here. Mandela is succeeded by a fellow named Thabo Mbeki, another communist thug. And then he's in turn succeeded by the more recent president of South Africa, a man named Jacob Zuma. Now, who is Jacob Zuma? I got an interesting thing, which the press ignores, because political correctness today trumps the truth. Jacob Zuma raped a woman about 4 or 5 years ago in South Africa. He was brought up on trial. He said she wanted it. He was brought up on trial. A crowd gathered and said, if you convict him, we're going to kill you. He was acquitted. The woman had to flee to the Netherlands. Folks, I ask you, where are the women's groups? Where are the women's groups? The same thing for Bill Clinton and the Juanita Broaddrick rape. Mandela is an unrepentant terrorist. He was offered a pardon while he was in prison if he would renounce terrorism. He refused. South Africa, 2,000 white farmers have so far been murdered by these terrorists, all associated with the ANC. They even restricted how high you can build a fence in Johannesburg residential areas. Well, they don't want you to have the burglars or the murderers to have a hard time getting in to kill you. And that's what's going on in today's South Africa. It's not a place you want to live, and if you go there to visit, you better be careful. I want to leave you another footnote here of the world's hypocrisy. Now, you're all familiar with the country of Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan became independent in 1991. It was admitted to the United Nations. But how many of you realize at that time an Asian minority ruled over a white majority in Kazakhstan? 57% of the people were white. Russian, Ukrainian, German, Latvian. 43% were Kazakhs, ethnic Kazakhs. And it was a semi-dictatorship, not like South Africa, which had total freedom. Where was the outrage? Why weren't they sanctioned? No rights for whites. Where was the outrage? But the outrage was reserved for apartheid. Apartheid is a dirty word. Yet the black man had the highest standard of living in all of Africa. The healthcare system was second only to the United States. Group Shore Hospital, where Christian Barnard performed the first heart transplant. Today, it's affirmative action healthcare. And this is the legacy of Nelson Mandela, a South Africa that's going down the tubes just as quickly as Zimbabwe. And I say to people, you know where the country with the most billionaires in the world are? Zimbabwe. But it costs $2 billion to buy a loaf of bread. Thank you. If you want to see some of my literature, the proof that apartheid wasn't that bad, I've got it right here. I've got pictures and everything. I open it up to questions. Yeah, ma'am.
I understand during apartheid that the illegal immigration problem there was widespread.
You're right.
People were
You're right.
coming in.
Right.
And in
Yeah, they had almost close to 1 million people entering illegally just to get jobs and improve their standard of living from the north of Africa. And oh yeah, I want to recommend a book for everybody if you get a chance. It's called Dark Star Safari by Paul Theron, Theron. It's overland from Cairo to Cape Town. It talks about how Africa has deteriorated from 1962, when he was a Peace Corps volunteer there, how it's gone downhill. And it's pretty horrifying what's going on. Yeah.
just to let everybody know, you can go to the newamerican.com
Yeah, newamerican.com.
put in Nelson Mandela's name
Absolutely.
and you'll pull up all kinds of information on
He
it.
was not a nice guy. And if anyone here is going to hear Senator Cruz, would you please tell Senator Cruz to Google the Denton Committee of 1983 about Nelson Mandela and the ANC. Thank you. Okay, yes.
I remember, I've been working on Longboat Key forever. I've done for the painting company. And I remember the big flight out of South Africa. Kimberly Clark was there.
Mm-hmm.
And all the South Africans and the English, they got the hell out of Dodge
Oh, yeah.
years ago.
Oh, yeah, they had to.
And they were all buying places out on Longboat Key.
Yeah, there's a braai that they throw in November. There's a bunch of South Africans living in Northport, and they have this annual braai. And if you want to know what's going on, how bad it is, go to that braai and they'll tell you, because there's more and more people coming over to escape.
So Joel, didn't Nelson Mandela get the Peace Prize
I forgot
in
about that.
1993?
Yeah, Mandela got the Peace Prize along with de Klerk for selling out his country, and also Bishop Tutu. I just want to throw in a few words about Bishop Desmond Tutu. While we were there, we saw his house in Soweto, but he wasn't there. His wife was there. And you know where he was? He was in Cape Town with his mistress as a priest in a church. And one of our priests from my Anglican church told me, Father Blythe, he personally saw Mandela steal $100,000 from foreign aid that they got from the church. He saw him steal $100,000 and nobody did a thing about it. That's Bishop Tutu.
So really the message is to get the U.S. out of the UN or the
Absolutely.
UN out of the U.S. and get these women's groups to start reading and learning and doing and acting and not being passive and ignorant. And Obama got the Peace Prize along with Mandela. I think that's amazing.
Okay,
Yeah.
in Rockwall, Texas, you can get a free Nobel Peace Prize with oil change.
Oh my goodness.
Picture of
If you want to see this picture, you can come up here. This was taken in Soweto. I was on the bus and I said, stop that bus immediately. This is the Confederate flag at a black store owner's and it says USA under it. I want to see that.
Oh, Joel, thank you. I want to ask you to sign in if you did not sign in, because I know many of you came in late or didn't make the effort. Don't forget to take off your name tag and return it. I want to tell you, next month on March 4th, a month from today, we have Dr. Jonathan Matusitz coming. I'm going to put his name on the board so you can Google him. He is a young man who's probably going to be the next Dennis Michael Lynch. His topic is terrorism, and he talks about the background behind terrorism, how it got started, what is keeping it going, and how we can do something about it. So he's not just giving us the facts, he's giving us solutions. And he's probably 40 years old at the most. He's got a good beginning to something very powerful and strong. So I hope to see you. Judy? Yeah, or excuse me, yeah. Joni?
I'd like to say something to the group,
Sure,
just real quick.
sure. This is Joan Greenfield.
Probably about a year ago, I started boycotting going to the movies because we all know that Hollywood has a direct link to the Democrats. And I can't believe, with all our soldiers overseas fighting to protect our freedoms, how many friends I've said, don't go to the movies anymore, you're supporting the Democrats. And they're Republicans and they really believe in conservative values, but we like the movies. And I said, that little bit of sacrifice, you can't find something else you would enjoy when you know it's like supporting terrorism. So I implore everybody to stop going to the movies.
All right, Joan, that's good thinking. Maybe we should have an open mic. That's great. Anybody else want? You know, Kathy, Kathy Bolam, did you get the signatures you were looking for, the help that you wanted?
No, we passed out literature though.
Okay, so you probably saw Kathy in the foyer. Brenda, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I just wanted to invite everybody to our Faith and Freedom meeting on the 16th because we're having an interesting speaker from Washington, D.C., Rob Schenck, so you won't want to miss that. And
The 16th of February.
16th. He has this group called Faith in Action. He has an office directly across from the Supreme Court. On top of his 3-story office building is a replica of the Ten Commandments, which got vandalized last year. But he actually is in Washington, and he is active in witnessing to the legislators there. So he'll have a lot of good stories to tell.
February 16th, that's 12:30?
Right.
12:30 at Faith and Baptist Church. Yes, Julie?
I decided to make an announcement as well too. How many in this room actually have a ticket now to the rally for Ted Cruz? Great. Okay. I have volunteered with the Republican Party of Sarasota, and because I put together a booth at Martin Luther King Day on my own, and we had representation there for the first time. We were invited to be there. The chairman of the party gave me a number of complimentary tickets.